Okay, public communication, you are welcome and encouraged. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, Arnaldo, on your name. I don't know, that faux pas just hit me. It was, whoa. You are welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Public comment is taken on items listed on the agenda when they are called. Public comment on items not listed in the agenda will be heard at this time. Comments on controversial items may be limited, and large groups are encouraged to select representatives to express the opinion of the group. We have some written requests. First of all, John Munger and Rob Thompson regarding Sites Reservoir project. And then after that will be Richard Hobbs on code enforcement after they're finished. And they get 5 minutes at least.
Okay. Get organized here. Yeah, I got copies. I don't want that. Hey, good evening, Mayor John Munger, and also good evening, council members. I'm John Munger with Garden Highway Mutual Water Company, in which we are a participant in the Sites Reservoir project. I'd like to talk to you tonight about Sites Reservoir. I mean, as you've heard lately, all we've been hearing about is Oroville, and want you to know that there's actually another project out there that's going through a very important process, and I'm here before you tonight to ask for a letter of support for the Sites Reservoir project as they go through the Water Commission process, and that application is going to be turned in on August 14th. Here with me tonight is Rob Thompson. He's with Sites Authority, so any questions that I can't answer, he'd be able to do that. Sites Reservoir is an off-stream storage project. It's 10 miles west of Maxwell. It's a locally driven project done by a group of many different water companies and agencies here locally. And the important part of this project is it's a off-stream reservoir, like I said, and it's got many environmental benefits attributed to this off-stream reservoir. So I have a brief PowerPoint presentation, just like to run you through that and see if you have any questions as we go through that. So as we go through it, please ask me anything you may need to know. So we're looking at the location of the project here. It's, like I said, 10 miles west of Maxwell and Colusa County. On this slide, we have all the different members and participants here locally. Those that are in blue are the members or on the board of the Sites JPA. And then the other ones below it there are participants within the authority. As you can see, there's lots of local, here in Northern California, lots of local members. As you can see, the benefits, some are listed here. A lot of reliable water for California homes, farms, and businesses. A big part of this project is environmental flows for native fish. Improved water quality, contributes to California's renewable energy goals. That can help with groundwater recharge, flood management, and important water for Pacific flyway habitat for migratory birds and native species, and also recreational opportunities. So as you may recall, in November 2014, a Prop 1 bond was passed. And a big part of that bond process, and one of the major projects that was discussed during that time was Sites Reservoir. And so now the whole process of getting that funding is starting to gear up, and Up to that, the state can contribute up to 50% of the cost. And based on this slide, you can see that there's certain parameters that have to be met in order for the state to participate. So, for example, in 2016, we could have had 532,000 acre feet of environmental water if this project was already built. I know the slide's hard to see. I gave you copies in front of you, so it does lay out the timeline of how this project is going to go through the process. Essentially, we're really gearing up to try to start construction with permitting in 2022. So with that, I'd like to formally request a letter of support from the City Council for this project and for the Water Commission project. I'm here to answer any questions you may have as well.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Munger at this time?
Through the mayor,
Yes.
is this the same project that Simon Gallagher's pushing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
Project's been around for a long time. Quite a few $1 million has been spent toward the environmental studies and all kinds of stuff to be put on the shelf and then asked again to be done again. This has been something, actually, I think this project has been environmentally abused. And they should get some credits for that through the process. So all I know is it's definitely qualified for all those benefits that you listed up there. Being a fisherman, I know that it will be able to allow the water to be cooler and colder in the rivers when the fish are running, because crops like warm water, they don't like cold water. Otherwise, it affects them in their growth, especially rice. And so all the nuances in there, this sites would actually fulfill many of the deficiencies and difficulties that are out there in the community of environmental and ag and fishing and just all of it. So you know where I feel about it already, but the rest of the council has to weigh in on that. Anybody else? We will bring this to the staff to for a decision on that and bring it to the council at another date, and we'll see what happens.
I would just like to note that the application's due, or it's going to be submitted August 14th. So time is of the essence. If a letter could be.
Is this something already within
quicker.
our policy, previous policy for water? Any way we could?
Mr. Mayor, even the letter, if it was submitted, if you chose to submit a support, could be submitted after our submittal of the 14th and still be considered by the California Water Commission.
Good.
So it doesn't necessarily drive your schedule.
Right.
But
Well, usually we need a policy that kind of is already to line it with if we're going to do it that, and then I can just sign it. But
So we do have a meeting, as was referenced earlier, on August 15th. If that would suffice, we'd bring that back for their formal approval. We could have that letter that signed that evening, subject to council approval, that is.
well, as you can readily tell from this schedule, a little humor, the process is going to be going on with the Water Commission through about this time next year.
Okay.
Sooner is better. This is a Northern California centric project, as you could see by the participation. It's not driven as in 2001, when this project was called the North of Delta Offstream Storage Project. It was driven as a supply project for the whole state of California, with more water heading south. Since the authority has taken over responsibility for this project, you can see that this is a Sacramento Valley-centric project now, with approximately half of the water going to water agencies in the Sac Valley, and all of the water for environmental purposes would be used either in the Delta or all the way up to Shasta, provide cold water pool for the salmon that you're so fond of.
Yep, I'm familiar with
Yeah.
pretty much the thing, but the public's gonna need to know. Yeah, I guess the staff know what we would like, and thank you. Appreciate your bringing the awareness and the timeline to us.
Very much.
Okay, Richard. Yes, sir. Richard Hobbs. Your turn. And sometimes the meetings get very lengthy.
That's okay, man. I won't take up much of your time.
No problem.
Hey, so I got a little concern with a compliance order that I received for my residence on Skyline Drive.
Okay.
I have a one of those metal carports that you see a lot of, and I was got a compliance order to remove it because it's too close to the property line. And it's my understanding, I've talked to Arnaldo about this, and he's a great guy, by the way. I love talking to him. We had quite a visit. But anyway, I really don't see the problem with it. I mean, if you have anything parked there, like a lot of people do under these, because we've done a little research and there's quite a few of them in Yuba City. So, you know, you can park a motorhome, and we use it for shade to cover our belongings, you know, our cars and our boats and RVs. And there's quite a few of them around the city. My neighbor, Mr. Tompkins, has got one. He lives across the street. He's had the same compliance order. But I don't understand the problem. The fire department, from what I understand, they don't have a problem with it. It doesn't affect them in any way. But it's just I think Arnaldo told me it was a state code.
We adopt
For
state
these?
codes.
Yeah.
State comes out with them, Title 24 and all kinds of stuff that we can increase them but not go below those.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
So I really don't understand what the problem with people having these carports for shade to protect their valuables, you know, their belongings, their RVs. You know, there's some of them that have $500,000 RVs parked under them. If the shade wasn't there, the RV still would be. So hopefully we can keep ours. That's why I'm talking to you guys. I've talked to Arnaldo about this. I talked to Mr. Dirks about it. And so that's why I'm coming to you guys to see if there's a possibility that we can still keep them. They're not an eyesore. So if you're for
I can
your
only speak for
consideration,
myself at this point, that I will go and at least review it with staff.
okay,
And you probably put all of us on alert to at least ask a little more detail on it. So
Okay.
from the ministerial side, which is the regulatory, the side of it, and see, you know, what the actual title regulation is.
okay.
So we'll at least look into it.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, if your council would desire, this matter has been looked into by Arnaldo Rodriguez, and he can provide, if you desire. I want to be respectful of Mr. Hobbs' time,
Okay.
in that not having to have you necessarily come back. I don't know if there's an easy answer to this, and that's what I fear. I'm concerned that you may have come here this evening to come before an elected body that is in charge of implementing a code that's a state and international code over which they don't have any discretion, and that's a really awkward circumstance to be put in. It's not your fault. I'm not saying that at all, because you have a fair request.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to have staff, if the council desires, give some context as to why our hands might be tied on this, because I think you present a very straightforward ask.
Well, you know, we've done some research just in the northern part of the city, and we've found over 100 homes. I have a list of like 5 pages of addresses.
No, I think the issue is pervasive.
same
It's just
conditions
it's a matter of
we-
whether or not it's allowed by the International Building Code from a health and safety. I think you're absolutely right. In my neighborhood alone, I can walk around and probably see half dozen of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so and if you need more addresses, let me know. We can.
I don't think I want to put Arnaldo on the spot right at this time. I'm not sure. You don't mind? Okay. Go for it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Arnoldo Rodriguez, Development Services Director. Mr. Hobbs is correct that him and I met probably 10 or so days ago. We met for quite a long period. So a couple of things just to offer a little bit of perspective. The city has recently experienced a relatively large influx in code enforcement cases. Some of that, quite frankly, it's the YC311 system, which is an excellent tool for our community members to report cases. Some of the challenges that staff experiences is as you're receiving those cases, we obviously want to be responsive to community members. And what happens on occasion is if one community member is cited, oftentimes they'll say, hey, well, my neighbor is doing the same thing, or the guy 2 blocks around the corner. For example, just to offer some perspective to Mr. Hobbs' situation, last month there were 16 very similar cases identical to Mr. Hobbs that were reported. So last month, in the month of June, there were 16 for buildings without the benefit of city permits. This is a slide that offers, in terms of the recent influx I was talking about, going back to 1987, you have 2016, 2017 on the tail end. This is a photo of Mr. Hobbs' property. I deleted the addresses. So if his house looks a little discolored in some places, that's only because I was removing his address using Photoshop. His house, it's a very well-maintained home. So this photo was taken this morning at about 7:30 in the morning. Again, it's in his particular case, it's not an aesthetic issue. It's part of the challenges. We have the zoning regulations, which our local zoning code states that you cannot have a building on the side property line closer than 5 feet to the property line. In Mr. Hobbs' case, it's probably 18 inches from the property line. So it's 2 feet from the property line. So the city council, through the variance process or the planning commission, does have the authority to waive those 5 feet. However, that's only one of the items that's really at issue. The second issue, which the council does not have discretion on, that's the California State Building Code. California State Building Code, the city council adopts it. With that being said, even if the council did not adopt it, quite frankly, our hands are tied. What? We being an extension of the state when it comes to the California Building Code, are mandated to implement it. So again, in this particular case, again, it was a code enforcement issue. City staff does very, very little trolling in code enforcement, and what trolling means is we're going up and down the roads looking for cases. It would probably be ideal if we had those resources. However, historically, we have not done that practice, with the exception being of certain cases: snipe signs, abandoned shopping carts, graffiti. When we see those issues, we are very proactive. And we've also been proactive on a handful of streets. For example, Walton Avenue, Garden Highway. We have been proactive in those neighborhoods because we've received numerous complaints over the years from business owners, from property owners saying, "Can you please clean up our neighborhoods?" So along certain roads, we have been proactive. This was not one of those cases. This is directly across the street. Again, there are no addresses on any of those homes. Again, it's this one's probably a little bit closer than 5 feet, but at the same time, a couple of other examples. This is one in our community. It's in the front yard. This is a relatively large structure. It's on a very prominent street. I think a lot of people probably know exactly where this is at. This is another one where we've contacted the property owner. This is another example, which is looks slightly larger than or taller than Mr. Hobbs. Here's another example where this is right in the front yard. This creates multiple issues. And one other one, this is another example. So while there are a lot of them that are metal, that's not to say that they're all metal. And however we treat one community member, we have to be equitable in terms of our application of the law. And in this particular case, aesthetically probably doesn't look as nice as the other ones. However, in terms of the setback issue, because it's not a matter of not having the ability to obtain a permit for his building, that's not the issue. The issue in his particular case, he simply doesn't have the space in terms of where he wants to put it. The other challenge that Mr. Hobbs has is at his parcel, there's probably no good place to put it because his parcel size doesn't lend itself very well because he simply cannot meet the setbacks. That's part of the challenge. The larger your parcel, the more opportunities you have. In Mr. Hobbs' case, it's a conventional single-family home, which is probably 65% of the homes in our community, which make it challenging to erect these types of structures.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, in the case specifically of Mr. Hobbs, in my best case scenario, we figure out a way where his neighbor says, I don't mind. I know that may not work in practical reality, but let's just say. What is the building code issue, though? You mentioned that's the one that the council does not have discretion on. He mentioned that the fire department, and I don't know who made the representation, but it's a small community, so I trust that it's probably the case. Fire department says there's no issue. What's the building code issue?
So when buildings are closer than a certain number of feet to the property line, which in Mr. Hobbs' case, I think he has 2 feet, then what's required, it's a firewall. And a firewall cannot have any openings, and it also has to exceed 2 feet above the parapet of the house. So in Mr. Hobbs' particular case, you would take the overall height, say it's probably 10 or 12 feet in height. It's 10 feet. You would have a solid wall running along his property line. On top of that, it would have to exceed 2 feet above that. So you would have a 12-foot wall running alongside of his property line for the distance of his property line. And his neighbor would obviously have the same thing. So that probably falls along the line more of an aesthetic issue, if that's something that the community would really be in favor in. You would have a lot of tall walls throughout the community.
Then zero lot line regulations come in and complicate things, and
they do. So the building code. So I oversimplified the building code. But that's just
it gets really.
There's a little bit more to it with footings and everything.
Mr.
else.
Mayor, back to your original point, I'm glad. I appreciate you affording the opportunity for Arnaldo to present. That said, back to your original point of sending it back to staff. Obviously, we'll have a conversation with the fire department. Staff and ask what their issues are and put together a little synopsis and see where we can go from here. I can't promise a rose garden that it'll be perfect, but know that we take everything seriously from $60 million bids on bridges to carports next to homes. So thank you.
There have been other communities that have tried to at least address some of this potential issue like this happening, to where any metal building company that wants to build or put it in there or to be constructed, there's some kind of a notification of lot lines or some kind of, especially if it's a distributor that they are notified that they do business within the community. There's these regulations that they're going to have to comply with, and that only mildly alleviates the situation because people just do it anyway, and they'll just ignore that. But that has been done in other communities. So, yes.
On my behalf and my neighbors, we had no idea that. We figured it was a portable building. We had no idea.
Right.
Honestly didn't.
And that's the majority of the case.
We weren't trying to take advantage of anything.
Right. And that's the majority of the case, and that's what happens.
The other thing to keep in mind is, just small research, we found over 100 homes, just in the northern part of the city. There's no telling how many.
We understand. It's the best I can say. We get it. We live out there too, and we'd like to do sometimes some things, and we find out later, and we have to comply. When we don't have a choice, we do something wrong, we get it fixed quickly. At least I do. With that, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for coming to us and discussing it. And using the soundboard that's of your electeds. Appreciate it. Okay. Now, I'll move on to number 9, which is appearance of interested citizens. Member of the public may address the city council on items of interest that are Within the city's jurisdiction, individuals addressing the general comments are encouraged to limit their statements to 3 minutes. Is there anybody else here that has not given written for speaking with us?